Hello, my name is Daniel Bundrick, and I'm a licensed pharmacist now for 38 years. I graduated right here in Columbia, South Carolina, University of South Carolina College of Pharmacy in 1984. First of all, thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee, for allowing me to give my insight and my pharmacy perspective, as an advocate for medical cannabis. And I am thankful, as other pharmacists mentioned, that pharmacists and physicians will be involved in this process. I currently work at Nephron Pharmaceuticals in their employee pharmacy. Before that, I own my own pharmacy at Surfside Beach. I bought it in 2016, and that's where I started actually selling CBD products and using them eventually. And I've got some stories that I'll share at the end. Besides that, in my career, I've worked at Loman Home, which is now Lutheran Homes. I've worked at SCANA, which is now Dominion Energy. I worked at Palmetto Senior Care and the Medically Fragile Children's Program at Richland. It's now Prisma. So I guess I'm an older pharmacist. All these people's changed and that sort of thing. I'm also married to Leanne. She was the executive director of the South Carolina Board of Pharmacy, and she's retired now, a state retiree. I've been a preceptor and an instructor for students for pretty much my whole career. I've taught MUSC, USC, Presbyterian, and South University. I won Preceptor of the Year in 2006 and 2011. A new project I've got going now, I just signed a contract with Capital City Broadcasting, and I've got, we're gonna do a nationally syndicated radio show about pharmacy. There's nothing out there like it, and again, it's kind of, we're trying to teach patients to become consumers of healthcare and to really educate them on pharmacy, because we know there's so many powerful prescriptions and so many deaths in America. One example would be fentanyl patches for cancer pain. They're designed to be, placed on the skin transdermally, used over 72 periods. A simple conversation with the pharmacist, they can't be used with a heat source like a heating pad. So there are a lot of deaths in the United States and worldwide where, if you got pain, you say, oh, I'm gonna put a heating pad. Well, if you put a heating pad on a fentanyl or Duragesic patch, that's where the death, all of it goes in your system at one time. So I've been a big proponent my whole career of, pharmacists go to school for 6 years now, and not just to put the pills in the bottle, put the label on straight, but they really are become the drug experts. And I really preach having that conversation one-on-one with your pharmacist. I teach people to get to know your pharmacist. That's somebody you need to know. They can cut through the clutter and give you the real world information of what you need to know. If you give them a patient printout with all those side effects that we were talking about, they're probably going to say, I don't want to take this. So you kind of cut through the clutter and give them what we call real clinical pearls, how to properly and safely take that medicine. So I want to kind of share with the committee, from my experience with pharmacy and how I've kind of transformed to being an advocate for cannabis. When I first started pharmacy school, Dr. Dean Sadek brought up, he asked the class, he said, does anybody know what a xenobiotic is? And of course we stared at him blankly. And he went on to say a xenobiotic is a foreign substance. And one day, when y'all become pharmacists, you're gonna be selling xenobiotics to your customers. And when you sell a xenobiotic, your body tries to reject it because it's not a natural substance. And it will try to reject it. So all these prescriptions that I sell for my whole career have been that way. One of the things which you look at with prescription drugs is...
Doc, I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to interrupt you. Okay. Your time is up, and we have a question from Representative Jermaine Johnson for you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Daniel.
Hey, Jermaine, how are you?
Yeah, I'm doing good. How you doing? I've had conversations with Daniel. He works with my wife, who's, like I said, who's a pharmacist. So thank you so much for being here. I'm very interested in hearing the rest of your testimony because I know you have extensive knowledge in this field, in this area, and I'm interested in just really hearing the rest of what you have to say. So, but if you can concise it a little bit, I would definitely be interested in hearing what you got to say here.
Okay, I'll try to make it quick. One of the things, we always look as a pharmacist is risk versus benefit. So you can check the box with medical cannabis. The risks are very minimal, the benefits are huge. The other thing you look at is a side effect profile. Again, with medical cannabis, dry mouth, sedation like we've talked about, but really no serious things. Some of the drugs that I sell have what they call black box warnings, where, it can cause cardiac arrhythmias and serotonin syndrome, all these crazy things. So compared to the regular prescription drugs, a lot safer. The other thing would be drug-drug interactions. You can find hard to find where there's drug interactions with cannabis. Even with CBD, when I did my research doing that, the only thing we could find was blood thinners, and it's kind of ironic because it makes the medicine work better on drugs like warfarin. But again, it can be used. The doctor just has to adjust the dose. So it just gives us a tool because it's a safe, an effective type medicine with little or no side effects. The other thing I want to kind of talk about a little bit is just how powerful the cannabis is. Like right now, we're kind of handcuffed. CBD is great. I'll try to tell one of my stories anyway. I know we don't have time. But isolate versus full spectrum. So when I sell CBD products, I mainly sell full spectrum. So what that means is it's got the CBD, which is cannabidiol, but it also has the flavonoids, it has the terpenes, and has the federal limit of THC or cannabis that we can have. But when you put all that together, you get what they call the entourage effect. So these low doses are very effective. When I sell an isolate for people like commercial truck drivers that can't test positive, so they have to buy my THC-free formula. Well, those have dust on the shelves. They just don't work as well. So that little bit of cannabis that we can put in CBD is so helpful. So I do want to put that apart. I've got lots of stories, but I guess I'll tell.
Doc, we're going to have to interrupt
Okay.
you. If there are any questions from any other members of the committee? Oh, Ms. Brawley, question from Ms. Brawley.
Thank you for your presentation. My question is quick and simple. Do you believe, in your expert opinion, that cannabis is addicting?
No, quite the opposite. And again, especially with medical, and if you've got physicians and pharmacists evaluating this, I don't think so at all. I think it's very safe. Almost related to like, if I can use an example, like black elderberry has as much antiviral properties as Tamiflu does. And so, if I'm giving it to my granddaughter, I'd rather her take elderberry versus Tamiflu, because the side effects, if you read that the side effects of Tamiflu, it's a lot more than with that. So I feel the same way with that. And again, the opioid crisis, I'm working with some physicians in Cedars-Sinai, California, on a project with that also. So I just think that's the real crisis in America.
And that
the
leads
opioid crisis.
to my second question. Do you
Yeah.
think opioids are addictive?
Yes.
Thank you.
I'll share one story. It's tough to talk about. Excuse me. When I owned my own pharmacy, I got robbed at gunpoint. And they came in with masks, and they went right by the register. So they wanted to get my opioids in the safe. Luckily, I'm a concealed weapons person, so I ran them out the store, but that's what they were after. They both were arrested, and they're heroin addicts. So compared to opioids, this is just so much safer.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Question from Mr. Hart.
Yes.
Thank you for being here. I want to go back to the question that Representative Brawley asked you, and I want to make sure for our testimony, the opinion that you just gave, she asked you, did you think that cannabis was addictive? I want to ensure that your opinion is not anecdotal. It's just not a feeling. Are you giving your opinion that's based on your medical training, your medical history, and your medical experience?
Yes, and I have researched a lot of this. I've worked some with Dr. Steve Cutler, which I hopefully will testify. And, he helped get the drug Epidiolex passed, so I've talked with him extensively. And it's my personal opinion, yes, but I also, everything I've seen with the CB1 and CB2 receptors, I just do not see that. And again, especially if it's being monitored, again, yeah, everybody can, do it recreational and get high and all that, but that's not what we're talking about here. But for what the control setting that we have, I just do not see that. It's a plant-based, like someone said, it was grown organically, no pesticides, and, it's gonna be turned by extractions with great equipment. They usually use supercritical CO2 to extract it to get the tinctures and that sort of thing. So it's a good process and a safe process. And I just don't see any research I've done that it's addictive at all or a gateway drug.
Okay, Any other questions or comments? Okay. Okay, Ms. McGarry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Brundrick, I do have a couple of questions, if you don't mind. So, you referenced the dosing just a little bit ago. Is there any other drug that authorizes a similar amount of doses that we'd be using with this cannabis?
Clarify, I'm not quite sure what you're asking.
Well, you know that we have to titrate up, and we're doing the doses like I had
Yeah, with
described
the
earlier.
pens. Yes, I'm not in a state that's studied it that much like the other pharmacists, so I'm not privy to those, but everything I've seen is just very safe.
No, there's no other drug that we have out there that we're looking at that doses like that, though.
I don't exactly know what you're asking, I'm sorry.
Well, if you look at it, we're titrating up, we're doing it in the concentration level. There's just nothing out there that we've done ever like this, I'm sure.
And hopefully the other states that have done this, there will be
Right.
protocols and, minimum doses, max doses, but again, I think that's gonna be an individual thing. Pharmacists actually dispense medication. We don't prescribe it. The physicians will be doing that. So, we will be trained on the exact dosing when it's time and when we can actually have that tool in our chest.
And at this point in time, you're still filling opioid prescriptions, correct?
Yes,
And yet we have an opioid epidemic.
yes, it's hard.
So, and there's no way that you can say that we won't have a marijuana epidemic.
But again, it's a plant-based medicine with so much less side effects. Those heroin addicts that come in on me, they would do anything to get that drug. You don't see people going in with guns in dispensaries and things like that. So I just think from what I've seen and read, it's just not an issue.
The FDA has, 3 approved cannabis-based drugs at this point.
Right, and that's a great point. But again, it kind of goes back to why I tried to make that point about isolate versus full spectrum. They're just not effective. Even the drug Epidiolex, which is cannabidiol, it's an isolate, so it's just that one compound instead of getting the whole benefit of that whole plant with that entourage effect. So that's where I go with that.
Do you not feel that this might be a bit political versus medical?
No, if anything, I sometimes it's hard for me to wrap myself that cannabis could be considered a drug. I almost consider it more of a plant. It's an organic plant, and so it's hard. We're gonna treat it that way. But the side effects, again, I go back to the elderberry. It's just so much safer. It's been around, cannabis sativa plant for years, and I just don't see any major problems where people had. Going back to alcoholism, I've seen alcohol wreck many lives. I have not seen, we've heard some testimony, but again, and I'm not advocating it in using the 7th grader and that sort of thing, but these are adults and children that need it for seizures under a doctor's care.
I can give you personal testimony. My brother is in prison. Started out with marijuana, went through the whole gamut of every drug possible, and he's been in prison most of his adult life. It does start with marijuana. But I will give this real test. I will weigh everything out.
Yes, ma'am.
But I also want to tell you, I find it odd that we're looking at state legislators on a drug. Why would state legislators be doing a drug? We're not doctors. We're not a pharmacy. Why are we looking at an illegal drug to make it legal? That's my question.
Thank you so much. We'll move to the next person.
Thank you.
Dr. Hold up. We have one more question for you. One more question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay. You said,
Yes, sir.
you said that people weren't being robbed for marijuana at gunpoint. I think you said something to that effect.
Yes,
Okay, that's not true. And even if it were true, it's because it's so darn easy to get. I could probably go out that door and get some marijuana quicker than I get a liquor drink, okay? That's number one. Number two, you said, and this is also incorrect, that it doesn't ruin lives. It does ruin lives. Ms. McGarry just said, told you about her brother, and I could sit here and probably fill this pad up with names that I know that it's ruined their lives and their parents' lives and their uncles and grandparents. I've got 4 children, 20 grandchildren, believe it or not, and 2 great-grandchildren. Thank you.
Not yet. A few more questions. Okay, Mr. Gilliard.
Yeah, thank you.
yes, sir.
Now, you say you've been in your profession for how many years? If I'm not mistaken, 38 years, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. How many states that they actually use cannabis, legalize the use of cannabis?
I think it's up to what, 33 or 34 now? I
Right.
believe.
Yes, 38. And have you ever heard any major problems from these 38 states? You know, because when we start talking about robbing people and stuff, hell, I know people got robbed for Alka-Seltz, tennis shoes. But have you ever heard of any problems?
No, I've heard one story in Colorado where they were talking about the driving with it, but even that, with insurance rates and things, but it actually turned out to be okay. But no, personally, I have not.
And doctor, are you familiar with the days of Prohibition?
I've heard about it.
Back in the 1920 when they actually ratified, the 18th Amendment?
Yes, sir.
Legalized alcohol. That's when the government decided to go ahead and take it out of criminals' hands and tax it and put the money to good use.
Right.
Yes, and you would agree that this reminds you of that, the days of Prohibition?
True. Yes.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, Mr. Tedder.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for giving your testimony today. I want to go back to what I think is a key point you brought up in the beginning of your story. When you were in pharmacy school, you learned about a xenobiotic, and you mentioned that your professor said this is what you would be prescribing in your career, and the body tends to reject it because I believe it's not a natural product, correct?
Right, foreign.
And I think an important point here to make is you also kept mentioning plant-based. And my assumption is that, well, my knowledge is that marijuana is plant-based and it's a natural product. And so the difference between, and if you could just tell us the difference between this natural product versus all of these, chemically created opioids, because I think that's an important point to make, that you're allowed to go prescribe all the stuff that's made up in a lab, but yet you get a lot of pushback for something that's naturally grown and plant-based.
Right.
So if you could just
Sure.
speak to the difference of that.
So it is, and that's a great question. It's just, how can I word it? Most drugs, like I said, and I go back to having that conversation with the pharmacist, having that one-on-one consultation, because there's so many examples where these chemically drugs are, have so many side effects. But like Marinol's been around forever, but it just doesn't work. Like when I worked at the Medically Fragile Children's Program, they didn't even use that for seizures, whereas this, really helps. Children with autism, if you get on any of those groups, the mothers and the physicians and that sort of thing, the advocates are on there, when they try to use just plain CBD, the isolates, again, they just don't work. But when they have that little bit of THC, that little bit of cannabis, it changes the whole picture because you get that full spectrum, you get that entourage effect.
Okay, thank you. And then just to add, in my my other career, I'm an attorney, and I do criminal defense, and I'll tell you that in my years of practicing and representing individuals who get accused of breaking the law or even, domestic violence, specifically that which is a big problem in our state. Not once has a person sort of attacked their spouse because they had too much marijuana. Typically, it's alcohol or opioids, but I just wanted to add that for what it's worth.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, Chair recognizes Representative Johnson, Jermaine Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think it's important to continue to remind everybody here that we're talking about medicinal versus recreational. I think we continue to talk about how marijuana is ruining lives and doing all these things like that, but we're still talking about medicinal marijuana under the direction of a physician. And when we're talking about that here, is it fair to also say that, there's a difference between, street marijuana and marijuana that's off the, the black market versus marijuana that is grown or in a controlled environment and, you know exactly how it's constructed. Is that a fair assumption?
Yes, I mean, like what the one gentleman said, most of these products, you can scan it with your phone, the QR code, and you get what they call the certificate of analysis. And when you get that, then you see everything. You see the terpenes, the flavonoids, how much content of CBD or CBG, cannabigerol, THC. So you see the whole picture and you can trust it and feel good about it. You buy it on the black market, they lace things and
That's
you don't know what
Thank
you
you.
get.
That's exactly where I was going into this. So is it fair to say that the medicinal strains would be safer than the stuff that we find in the street?
Correct.
And so
Definitely.
in that case, with the street drug, would you also say that we often find the street drug laced with other chemicals and drugs and things like that?
Sometimes I don't know if it's a huge problem, but I know that it is a problem. They are lacing with fentanyl and everything else. I know at spring break in Florida recently, they had all those issues. So, you want to get it from where you trust it, where you can download and look at exactly where it comes from. You know where it's been grown organically without pesticides. And again, it's just, a natural type product that's, and again, with that entourage effect is so important. And if you do make it synthetic, I know some companies are working on that now. I've been dealing with a company called Syncan out of the Czech Republic. And they're working on synthetic cannabis already. People are trying to do it. But what they're finding out, they're having to add more than just that isolate. They're adding terpenes also. They're adding these other things that the real plant has. But again, it's costing because you're adding all these things that God already gave us this plant that's here.
Yeah. So I too have a testimony with a friend who was a great basketball player. He was one of the top-ranked basketball players in the country, and he smoked some marijuana. But lo and behold, this marijuana was laced with something else. And when he smoked it, he was never right after that. He lost his mind. He ended up being homeless, going through a lot of different things. But that was because he smoked some laced marijuana. Now, I want everybody to understand there's a difference between smoking recreational stuff where you just have to trust the dealer, but how many dealers do we know that we can trust? So you have to be able to trust your dealer that, everything that you have coming in there and just take his word for it, take her word for it, and understand that this is different. Recreational and medicinal usage under the guidance of a physician, a qualified physician, are completely different.
Right.
Thank you.
And again, like you can use different strains, like sativa is more uplifting, whereas indica is going to be that. So, for this program, it would probably be more strains that are genetically sativa blends versus indica blends.
Okay, the final brief question from Representative Dabney.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Okay, you just mentioned sativa and it's, the other one's pronounced indica?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Not even gonna go into what that means. I know what it means. And the sativa, it's got a lot higher level of THC, correct? I think. But that I didn't even want to get into that. You just mentioned it at the end. Two things. Poppies are grown naturally, correct? You keep talking about plant-based and how you make it sound very innocent, plant-based. Okay, poppies are plants also, right? What do we get from poppies?
Morphine.
Yeah, and probably some other stuff. Okay, and there's a huge industry in some countries for growing poppies. All right, second thing, you said that as far as you knew, this hasn't been a problem in other states. I had a friend call me out of the blue from Washington State just a few weeks ago. And I wish I had recorded the phone call, because I would just play it right now. He said one of the things he says, it's ruined my state. And he talked about the unemployment, the crime, and just the terrible mess that this brings from your medicinal marijuana. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
One more question, please. Are you being paid to be here today?
No.
You're not on the clock at all?
No, sir.
Okay, you took leave to be here from your job?
Yes, I'm just part-time, yes.
Okay.